To me, the biggest moment was when I had to write that first purchase order. And I had to write that first purchase order before we had any kind of financing in place. So, basically, I was buying a bunch of bags. And, I had a real crisis of confidence at that point in time. Like, do I really want to do this? But luckily, Keith was on board at that point in time. Again, he kind of balances my things, and he's very optimistic. And he was really excited about this. And that meant a ton to me. So, it really helped soothe my nerves to write that purchase order and send that deposit through.
Podcasting from Boulder, Colorado. This is the Baby Got Backstory podcast, where we dive into the story behind the story of today's most inspiring storytellers, creators, and entrepreneurs. I like big backstories, and I cannot lie. I am your host, Mark Gutman. I'm Mark Gutman, and on today's episode of Baby Got Backstory, how two career executives in the bag and luggage industry broke ranks and built the bag that no one else would. Now, if you like and enjoy the show, please take a minute or two to rate and review us over at iTunes. iTunes uses these as part of the algorithm that determines ratings on the Apple charts, and ratings help us to build an audience, which then helps us to continue to produce the show. On today's episode, we are talking to Chad Mellen and Keith Bristol of Knack Bags. Knack is a new and exciting company that is getting a lot of attention for their unique perspective. One bag for both work and play. Chad is the CEO and founder of Knack and has spent his career in the branded luxury and premium accessory and retail industries. As a senior executive, he has been directly responsible for the development and growth of several iconic American and international consumer brands at private, public, and private equity-owned companies in the writing instrument, that means pens, pencils, that type of thing, luggage, leather goods, handbag, and accessory categories. Before Knack, he held CEO, president, CMO, VP sales, and director roles across companies such as A.T. Cross, Toomey, and Coach. Keith Bristol is the chief digital officer at Knack. Prior to Knack, he's been a creative director at an advertising agency and was instrumental in building the direct-to-consumer businesses for ebags.com and Toomey.com in the U.S. and globally. He has helped launch bootstrap startups scale or progress to acquisition, and he's a husband and father of two daughters, and I love this, the household athletic director. Chad and Keith both met while working at the well-known luxury luggage company, Toomey, and knew that someday they would work together again. They just had to find the right fit. And this is their story.
So what's Knack all about? Knack is all about trying to rethink how people carry their life with them. That's really it. And we've said from the very beginning, Keith and I, we just fundamentally don't get the current bag industry. And I've been part of the bag industry for a long time. I spent a lot of time at Coach, a lot of time at Toomey. And the idea that you have to put the things that you carry kind of in specialized bags to get from point A to point B, or not optimize how you carry them, it just doesn't make sense to us. And what do I mean by that? If you're going to go to the gym from work, what do you carry? You carry your work bag, you carry your gym bag. If you're going to take a quick overnight trip for business, what do you carry? You carry a carry-on, wheeled or a duffel, and you carry your work bag. If you've got a kid you're taking out, you probably have a tote and a diaper bag. It just doesn't make sense. It's how the business is, the industry's been built. They kind of grow businesses by further refining single function bags that match, increasingly smaller use cases. And our whole idea was, why can't one bag do almost everything and do it equally well? And that's what Knack's about. It's a business bag. It's an everyday carry bag that also really works well as a travel bag, a gym bag, a bag to carry photography equipment in, a lot of different uses. And the whole idea is you now have one bag to live your life.
Well, and thank you for that. And that's a great overview of what Knack is and what you stand for. And right now, currently, you are based in Oregon. And for the both of you, are you both originally from Oregon?
Well, actually, we're bi-coastal, and Keith's in Oregon, in Portland, and I'm actually looking out right now on the beautiful shores of Narragansett Bay in Rhode Island.
Very bi-coastal. You're about as bi-coastal as it gets.
We are about as bi-coastal as it gets.
Yeah. And so, Chad, where did you grow up?
I was born in New Jersey, and my dad was a marketing executive at Sherwin-Williams, which is the paint company, and they were in New York City. My mom and dad were both born and bred, dyed-in-the-wool New Yorkers. And, when I was 5, the company said to my dad, "You're moving to Cleveland, Ohio." That's where their headquarters were. He thought he was being sent to, purgatory or hell. This was the worst thing in the world to go from the tri-state area to Cleveland, Ohio. So I went when I was 5, grew up in Cleveland, and like my parents, loved it. I mean, absolutely loved it. I consider myself an Ohioan, a Clevelander. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Indians fan and Browns fan, and have brought that curse to my kids.
The only thing worse is being a Lions fan because I was raised in Detroit, so I've also brought that curse home to my family, so I can relate.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Well, at least the Tigers have won something recently.
That's right. That's right. And Keith, how about you? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in Nebraska, actually, in the heartland. I grew up on a farm. So it's funny. I was the first kind of generation to leave the farm and like go graduate from college and live in the city. I always wanted to live in the city. I don't know why, really. I just did. It always just drew me. Always really liked just the people and new and different things. And farming just wasn't for me. So I kind of left that world behind. And from there, I went to school in Nebraska, actually, and then moved to Colorado. And then recently, in the last 6 years, moved to Portland, Oregon. So I migrated west, but I'm definitely a Midwesterner at heart, diehard Husker fan. And so Chad and I have a lot of fun with Nebraska, Ohio State, although he has way more fun than I do in the current moment. Recently. Yeah. So,
it'll come around. It'll come around.
So that's kind of where I grew up and sort of my path.
Yeah. And so 2 Midwest guys, were you both into bags and fashion when you were young men living in the Midwest?
Funny. I guess you could say, Mark, I was pretty oblivious about everything, right through college. And no, I wasn't at all. I love brands, and that's something that I've carried with me. The idea of a brand has always fascinated me. The idea that, kind of a logo and a symbol and an aura, which we call equities now, can actually transmit so much information, not only about product, but about the person who uses the product, absolutely fascinated me. So that's probably the only thing that I can say that really kind of drove me to where I am now.
Yeah, I would actually, it's kind of funny because I didn't realize that, Chad, but I was the same way. I was a little bit more like that with advertising. So I was really obsessed with advertising. I just loved any kind of advertising as a kid, any product advertising, anything like that. And branding, I thought was just really a cool thing. So that's why I started my career actually out in an ad agency as a creative art director and a creative director. And how I got into bags actually was a complete fluke. I was in Denver and I moved to Denver for a startup. And that was back in the .bomb days when everything kind of was really, really high. And then it crashed really, really hard and ended up being at that company for 6 months or 8 months. It went under and I was looking for a place to land. And I found eBags, and I really, really liked eBags because they had a, kind of a more mature leadership group. And it's funny because when I started, I was like, oh, bags, that's not really that interesting. I'll be in bags for I don't know, 6 months or something. And lo and behold, I was there for over 9 years, and I got to work with some amazing people and kind of found my love for bags then, and then kind of reconnected with Chad. So that's kind of my bag connection. But now I'm obsessed with bags. Obviously.
Totally. And it's so interesting thinking about that time and going back in time and thinking about e-bags, because I think for listeners on our show, like they don't like, it's even in the name, e-bags. Like the revolutionary part about that whole business was that you purchased online, you know, and then they started to extend the brand a little bit into their own product line. But thinking about just, you know, how revolutionary was that when you got there and you're like, we're actually like selling bags on the internet.
Tremendously revolutionary. I mean, you know, the guys that founded it left Samsonite because they wanted Samsonite to do that. They wanted to sell online, and Sam's like, oh, no one will ever buy online. And frankly, I think we were one of only 3 startups, pure play startups, to make it through the dot bomb era back then. So it was a pretty amazing accomplishment, and all the things that we had to go through for that. So yeah, that was kind of a, you know, that was really amazing for me to be part of that. And even like you said, the name back then, you had to be called something because people didn't really know what e-commerce was, you know, and gosh, how, especially in the last, you know, couple months, how much it's changed drastically for so many companies. That's always been what I've done, online commerce, even after I left eBags. But and how Chad and I met was when he was at Toomey. We actually ran the Toomey.com website, and back then Toomey only had line drawings for their product. Do you remember that, Chad?
Yes,
and we had to reshot everything for them to put it online, to sell online, and that was like a big deal. It's funny to kind of look back now and just think how like second nature that is now, but back then it was pretty groundbreaking.
Yeah. And did you know what you were doing, or were you kind of breaking eggs as you went? Was it new ground? I mean, like I don't think there was a lot of people that had a ton of expertise in e-commerce in that way and to that scale.
That's a good question. I mean, there
time
wasn't really a lot of experience because we were really on the forefront of it. You know, there weren't a lot of people selling pure plays, selling online. I mean, there were definitely companies out there that had an online presence, and a lot of them just had branding sites. So they weren't even e-commerce back then. So a lot of it was, you know, for us just figuring it out. And, you know, sometimes it was going with your gut, but we were really big into testing things. And that's always kind of stuck with me. We test and see how people, you know, react, and down to like, what is the color of the button that they're supposed to click, and what's the word on the button. And so we were really big believers in that. And that's something I've taken with me everywhere I go. And we do that here as well. So yeah, that's,
you know, Mark, one of the stories Keith told me later on in our career is that after we flew out to Denver, you know, we being the Toomey team, flew out to Denver to say, hey, let's do this partnership where eBags and Toomey work together to launch Toomey.com. You know, the eBags guys are just knocking it out of the park during the presentation. They're saying great things, and we're all, you know, this is great. This is fantastic. Can't wait to work with them. We left the building and said, okay, guys, let's go ahead. We'll tie the deal together and let's go ahead. And then what did you say, Keith, after we left?
Yeah. So after the Toomey executives left the building, we all just kind of looked at each other like, okay, now how are we going to do this? And who's going to do it? Like, well, we don't know what we're doing. I mean, we knew what we were doing, obviously. Like, we knew how to run an e-commerce site, but we weren't really expecting Toomey to say, yes, let's move forward with this, because the backstory to that is we had tried to get Toomey to sell on eBags for, probably since the beginning of time that eBags launched. So Toomey was sort of that brand that we really, really wanted and we aspired to get. So when they, you know, talked to us about running their site, everyone's kind of like, yeah, we'll do it. We can totally do it. When they left, it was like, how are we going to do it? Who's going to do it? So it's kind of funny now, the two sides to tell those stories, and it worked out great. I mean,
it worked out great. Yeah.
Toomey was thrilled with it. We were thrilled with it. And, you know, I obviously met wonderful people there. And to this day, some of the dearest friends that I have are from Toomey and eBags times. And it's fun to kind of come back together with Chad to start, you know, Knack based on all of our history that way. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so let's rewind a little bit and talk about that. So what were both of your first forays into the bag world? So Chad, like how did you get into this industry and how did you get started?
So I left college and went to work for a strategy consultant in New York. And again, as I said, I was a little oblivious going through school. I was kind of following the herd mentality. And at our school, you either did one of two things. You went to work for an investment bank, you went to work for a consultant. And, I picked the consulting route, kind of, I don't even know really why. And I ended up with a firm called Kurt Salman Associates. That was a strategy firm that focused on kind of apparel, textiles, and retail. And what I found after about 2 or 3 months there was I loved that industry, just loved it. And of course, I knew that they did this going into it, but I really didn't understand it. And I'm going to give a little bit of my experience away here. We were dealing with people back then. Our clients were just amazing. Like at Polo Ralph Lauren, I was working directly with Peter Strom, who ran that company for a long time. At Saks Fifth Avenue was one of our clients, and I was working with Bert Tansky there. These are like real icons in luxury branded business. And the most important thing was I had a client at Coach, it was a division of Sara Lee back then. And I got to know Lou Frankfurt as a client pretty well. And he said, why don't you come and work for me? And I did. I went and became head of business development and then later head of men's products and product marketing and worked with Lou, who just taught me so much. And, kind of one of the first ahas in my career with Lou was how important a mentor is. And the product was great. Loved the Coach product. And this was way back, again, I'm dating myself, but this was, way back in the 90s. And Coach was about $100 million brand at that point in time. And it just launched stores, about 5 years beforehand. It was a small business, a relatively small business, and was starting to grow like a weed. And the product was just fantastic. And the kind of the smell of the leather and, going into the sample rooms and seeing the hides there and how these guys picked out the right hide and how they cut it and designed around it. It was just fascinating to me. And so the product really grabbed me, but then also the brand grabbed me. And one of the things that Lou said to me and said to a lot of people back then that still stays with me to this day, and we use it at Knack, is that in a brand like Coach, which is a consumer brand, but also has a fashion element to it, you've got to balance logic and magic. And I thought that was just so really on spot on, logic and magic. It's not all logic. This is not a spreadsheet business. There is some sort of element to it that's spiritual almost. Why do people like that color? Why do people like that shape? Why do people like that texture? That's kind of a magic portion of it. And that's not something that I have much skill set in. But the logic portion of it also has to work with the magic portion to create this brand and this aura and this product. And balancing logic and magic is something that I've absolutely carried with the rest of my career.
Yeah, and I totally love that. I mean, I speak a lot in on the stage, and I talk about that a lot when it comes to branding and building a brand, that it really is this combination of the logical and the magical. And I'm sure, obviously I didn't invent that. It was passed down to me by other brand builders as well. And I firmly believe it. And that's one of the things that I love about it. And it's also a little frustrating about it sometimes. That's the challenge. I mean, it's easier when we're talking about the logical side and putting things into frameworks. It's a little harder on the magical side. And I think, at least from my experience, you have to be willing to take risks and to have some failures, because in order to lean into that magical side, it's not always home runs.
Well, and also I think the real critical thing is as a manager of a business or an owner of a business that really is trying to work on both sides of the equation, you've got to learn how to kind of straddle and manage and talk to and relate to people that are on the logical side as well as people that are on the magical side. I found that in my experience, people that are creatively oriented just don't respond to the same kind of stimulus and direction and encouragement as people on the logical side of the business. And I think that's really challenging for a lot of people. And it's something that's been challenging for me, but I'd like to think I've kind of figured it out and very comfortable working with people on both sides of that equation.
And that's well said. And I think that, again, from my perspective, that, branding today isn't, about logos and colors and icons, but it really is more about bridging those two sides and being the bridge as a leader in the organization to maintain that feeling, that purpose, that culture, all those things that go into being a brand. So I love that. So why don't you guys take me back to eBags? You guys are working there. If one of you could first just paint the picture, kind of like, Keith was doing a little bit of that, talking about what's going on there, but I really want to paint the picture because when I look at, the company today, and this is not I'm not here to bash on eBags, but back then it was like something super revolutionary and something super cool. And today it's kind of like, I'm not sure where they are in the whole mix of things, but what was it like for you guys working at eBags and what were you both doing there?
Well, I think Keith needs to answer that. First, I was at Toomey. I was head of marketing. I was the chief marketing officer and head of product at Toomey. So I would travel out to Denver and work with these guys. I don't know, Keith, probably once every month or two for a couple of days, which was always a blast. But Keith was the one that was really living the day-to-day life at eBags.
Got it. Yeah. So, I can't speak to what's happened recently because I haven't been there. It's been a while since I've been there, to be honest. So, but when I was there, it was crazy. It was really, the nice thing about eBags and what drew me to it, honestly, and I said this earlier, was the leadership. When I first got into working in startups, the first one that I worked with we were all in our 20s and there was just really no leadership and it was kind of a chaotic to say the least. And so what I was looking for was really somebody that understood business and was running the business. So that's kind of what drew me to eBags, not necessarily the bags part. I'm a huge fan of John and Peter and those guys that started the company because they were, like I said, they came from Samsonite. They were a little bit had more experience. So they weren't your typical 20-some, CEOs of a startup. There's nothing wrong with that. Those folks are great too. But at the time, that's what I was looking for. And, we were coming right when I got there was sort of right when the .com kind of started, right? .bomb started happening. So it was very, very challenging from the beginning. And of course, back then, people weren't buying as much online. And so, we kind of had to earn that trust. And the biggest thing I think that I took from my experience at eBags was just, again, you mentioned it, Mark, is taking risks. We had to take risks to, especially doing something as pioneering as we were doing back then. And it's kind of funny to say that now because it's not that pioneering anymore, but back then it was. And so taking risks and also measuring and testing was so important. And the one thing I kind of took away is, from John Nordmark, I think he's probably definitely one of my mentors. And he was such a visionary. He just really, that's why he left Samsonite, because he really felt like there was a place for this and Samsonite didn't want to do it. So he wanted to be able to do it on his own. And the guy just really had a vision. I tell this story to a lot of people. He came in one day and he always would come in with like, hey, you guys got to check this out or check that out. And one day he's like, okay, you guys all have to, he told the whole company, like, you guys have to sign up for Facebook. Facebook is going to change the world. It's going to change, how people are, perceive the internet. We're like, yeah. Okay, whatever, and again, this is when Facebook first came out. So we signed up for it and kind of just left it and nothing really happened. And, like what was probably 6 or 8 months later, like all of a sudden you get Bing, friend request. And it was like, all of a sudden this thing just like took off and it was crazy. But he had that vision of like realizing that, at the time there were a lot of people that were doubting what that would do, but he always sort of had that vision of like, this will be a game changer. And so I've always kind of looked at things, new opportunities, and I brought that to everything that I've done since, is to look at new opportunities as just that, like it's something we should try if it makes sense. Obviously you can't try everything and you can't do everything you want to do, but you have to try to look for that future thing of what's going to, happen next. And so, it was also built with really, really smart people. They did a great job of hiring and bringing on really talented people that you can, give them a direction and they run with it and they're motivated. And I think that's what really, they had great leadership and they had great people that worked there and that were driven. So those two things. And I think the product was really, really good. I mean, everyone needs bags, as we all know. But so it's a little bit of that, like you've got to have all that working together. And as far as like where they are, I can't really say. I know when I was there, we went through quite a bit of stuff, obviously with, made it through the dot bomb, as I mentioned. We made it through 9/11, a lot of challenges with all that stuff. But through it all, I think we just persevered. I mean, I know that's kind of cheesy, but like you just really have to face all the challenges that come with a startup and with building a business, because there's going to be things like that you can't control, and what we're dealing with right now you can't control. But if you have really good people that are passionate and want to build something the right way, you're going to find a way to do it. So as it got bigger, obviously it changed, because you get more people in there. And when I think when I left, we had changed offices, and I don't even remember, it was like 150 people. I think when I started, it was like 80. I was there kind of the first year in. So it definitely changed a lot, a little bit more layers and different things like that, which slowed things down a little bit. And that's the thing I love about what we're doing. We're small and nimble right now. And, if somebody has an idea, they just run with it, and we jump on a call and talk about it, and we do it, and we test it and make sure that it works. So.
Yeah, thank you for that. My apologies. I have right here that you both met at Toomey, and somehow I had the signals crossed about
no
you
problem.
back.
Yeah, no problem. And that's how we met. Is like I said, we tried to get Toomey, and Toomey really was interested in doing their own e-commerce site, but they didn't have the technology background. So we brought our technology background to run the Toomey.com site. And then for the last probably 4 or 5 years that I was at eBags, I ran the division that ran Toomey.com. And so
is that
Chad
how
and
you
I
two
met
met
that way. And that's exactly how Chad and I met. So we met, and I say this all the time, like you meet people throughout your career that you're like, I'd really like to work with that guy again, or girl or whatever. But Chad was always one of those folks that I really, really had a lot of respect for. And I always said, I'd love to work with him again someday. And in fact, we tried to do it a couple times, but he couldn't convince me to move to the East Coast. And this sort of worked. And it's interesting, because when he came to me with the idea of Knack, I have kind of 2 criteria that I look for when I'm looking for my next opportunity. And one is the product, like, does it resonate with me? And when he told me about it, I was immediately hooked, because I travel a lot. I travel for 1 to 2 days, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how many times I've stuffed a backpack full of crap and couldn't make it work, or I pack a carry-on quarter of the way full because I had to. And I was like, oh my God, I would love to be able to travel with 1 bag and just expand it when I can. So I loved that concept. And then I really, of course, liked working with Chad and admired him a lot. And I think we actually balance each other a lot. A lot of the things that he brings to the table and his strengths are not mine, and vice versa. And so it was just a great fit. And he actually wanted me to move to the East Coast again. And I was like, I just moved to Portland, and it's not in the cards for me. But if you're ever open for doing this and building a remote team, I would be interested, because I've managed teams remotely for, 10 years of my life, and worked with offshore development teams and so on and so forth. So that was nothing new to me. It's a little bit more new to Chad. And so he's like, I don't think that's kind of what we're looking for right now, but we'll stay in touch. And so I kind of advised and just sort of helped while he was kind of working through some things. And then he calls me one day. He's like, you're never going to believe where the designer of the bag is located. And I was like, where? And he goes, Portland, Oregon. And there's a backstory there. But he's like, if you're up for doing this and you're still interested, let's try it and see how it works. And we agreed that we would be upfront with each other. And if things weren't working, that we would figure something else out. But so far it's been really, really great. We've been able to hire people from around the country, really, really smart people. And they all, again, they're all dedicated, and they are hardworking, and they know what they're doing. And it's been great. And especially with this current situation, it hasn't impacted us from a working standpoint. Obviously, it's impacted us in other ways like everyone else. But from a working standpoint, we've all worked remotely since we started the company. So it's been a fun thing to be able to do that and build this team, the way we built it is pretty unique. And I think it's, interestingly enough, I think it's kind of the sign of the future. I think there are going to be a lot more companies that end up doing this, because you can find really great people wherever you want to find them. And if you're organized about it, you can grow a company like this. So
this episode brought to you by Wildstory. Wait, isn't that your company? It is. And without the generous support of Wildstory, this show would not be possible. A brand isn't a logo or a tagline or even your product. A brand is a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or company. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. Wildstory helps progressive founders and savvy marketers build purpose-driven brands that connect their business goals with the customers they want to serve, so that both the business and the customer needs are met. This results in crazy, happy, loyal customers that purchase again and again, and this is great for business. If that sounds like something you and your team might want to learn more about, reach out at www.wildstory.com, and we'd be happy to tell you more. Now back to our show. Chad, so where were you in your career, in your life, when you said, hey, I'm going to start a new bag company?
It's a great question. A little bit of backstory. After Coach, I left, and as we talked about, went to work at Toomey as chief marketing officer. Toomey was a tiny little company back then, and worked closely with the founder, Charlie Clifford. And, went through real tough times, real great times. The 9/11 time in a travel bag company was just devastating. I had to fire the entire marketing staff. We all took salary cuts. It was devastating.
Sounds familiar to today, right?
Absolutely. It's like, wow, I never thought I'd have to do this twice in my career. But the business popped back up. It's a great brand, great product, great team. And we sold the business to a private equity firm, and I left and went to Rhode Island to become chief marketing officer and head of sales at A.T. Cross, the writing instrument company. So it's the first time I had been, since my consulting career, out of the bag industry. And, was CEO at Cross for a while, sold that business in 2015 to a private equity firm. After I learned the hard way that it's not really a winning strategy to, fight against a secular consumer trend. Writing instruments, unfortunately, are going one way, and it was tough. But anyway, after I left in 15, took some time off, did some consulting, learned to play piano poorly, had some fun. But ultimately, two things happened. I started to work on a totally different startup with a friend of mine, a guy named Bill Doherty, who had been the founder of Interactive Search Holdings, which was a company that had survived the dot-bomb and had their big brand was i1.com. So, and Bill and I were trying to do this crazy thing with donor-advised funds and democratizing them and trying to bring them to companies as a benefit for employees to attract millennials. So it kind of got a little bit of the entrepreneurial bug in me at that point in time. So we were working on that. Ultimately, we decided not to proceed for a bunch of reasons. But at the end of that kind of time period, I took a fishing trip to Costa Rica with some friends. And it was a short weekend trip, but still doing this, my giving account with Bill. And I had a business backpack with me. I had a duffel with me that had some fishing gear in it and, a couple pairs of shorts and some flip-flops. And as I flew from Boston down to San Jose Airport, I'm walking around with two bags, both half filled, in a place that speaks Spanish. I don't speak any Spanish. So I've got these two bags. I've got, a cup of coffee in my hand. I've got my phone out with my Spanish translator app to try to figure out where to go. And I'm sweating. Bags are falling off my shoulder. I said, this is just a terrible, terrible experience. And I said, I've been out of the bag business for a while. The first thing I do when I get back from this fishing trip So I'm going to go buy a bag that carries my business stuff and it's going to carry my, my travel stuff, my clothes at the same time. I don't want to stick my underwear and my toothbrush next to my laptop, so kind of the existing bags didn't work for me. So I got back to the States and looked for this bag that did two things at once. And it didn't exist. It didn't exist anywhere. And, because I've been in this category for a while, I knew all the brands, I knew the places to buy them. And I was shocked, Mark, that this didn't exist. It just was such an aha for me. And then I remember going to New York to visit with some people and just sitting in a coffee shop and looking out the window. And the amount of folks that had 2 or 3 bags that they were carrying was shocking to me. I mean, like I said, gym bags, diaper bags, tote bags, purses, backpacks, business cases, wheeled bags, duffels. I mean, all these things, people are carrying multiple bags. And I said, this makes no sense. And I knew, like me, these people didn't have another option. That's when the aha hit me. And I said, you know what? It's time to get back in the bag category. So I reached out to Charlie Clifford, and he and I had been doing some work together at that point in time and said, what do you think of this idea? And he said, I think this is a pretty good idea. And I kind of kicked it off at that point in time. So this was probably the end of 2016.
Yeah. And like all really good ideas, it seems really obvious and simple.
So obvious. But then you step back and realize why no company has ever done this, because it is so different than the prevailing business model, which I said is you grow your business by figuring out the 10 needs that Mark has and creating 10 different bags for each one of those needs. And, you figure out more needs, you figure out more bags. And that's so the idea of creating multiple function bags that do a lot of things really well is just foreign. It's anathema to the current category. So that's why I think it never got done, frankly. But as I said, I looked at this and I said, this makes no sense. We've got to fix it.
Yeah. And I think the whole business philosophy of selling more by selling less is fairly new. There's some companies adopting that, but I totally can understand that a big bag company looks and says, hey, we've got X amount of consumers. How do we, and fans and people in our network, how do we sell them more? They're loyal. Another bag. And I've fallen victim to that myself, where you start to have a billion bags, and I've got camera bags, and I have, messenger bags, and I have backpacks, and I have the travel bag, and I have the travel bag for when I want to be a little more businessy. I have the travel bag for when I want to be a little more adventure-y. Like it's crazy. And now I'm like drowning in bags that I don't use.
That's exactly it. So I looked at this and like, okay, first of all, this is really not a sustainable approach. This is consumerism run rampant. Secondly, I think that given the blurring of people's professional life and their personal life and how those two lives intermingle all the time, it's just a fact that people carry a bunch of stuff with them every day. It's not like 20 years ago where you had real cut and dried start to the workday, end to the workday. It gave you enough time to do stuff after the workday or before the workday on your own time. It just doesn't exist. So people are much more flexible and dynamic. Mobile, professionals are a big portion of the workforce going from point A to point B and not working out of a set office. All these folks were being really ill-served by this, unsustainable multi-bag approach.
Yeah. And so you have this idea and you float it by other industry experts and they're like, good idea. And then, so what's the process? What don't we know about starting a bag company? I mean, do you just go and make some sketches and sew it yourself? And, oh, this is great. I mean, like walk us a little bit through what that process looks like.
Well, I told you it's getting back to my logic and magic comment. I've got a lot of the logic side of me. I don't have much of the magic side, so I'm not sewing anything that anyone wants to buy. So, but one of the beauties of being an experienced, I'll say, or an older entrepreneur, first-time entrepreneur, is that you actually have a network. And we're so lucky, Keith and I, that we can call on some of the most successful people in this category's direct-to-consumer fields, or this category's supply chain fields, or this category's factories, or this category's branding and marketing, and really pick their brains because they know us, they've worked with us. So, I was really lucky that I was able to call some of the best factories, both here in the United States as well as overseas, and try to start getting an idea of, is this even constructible, this type of bag? I was able to find through kind of our friends and network great possible designers that I could then talk to and say, okay, here's the vision. Help me bring it to life. Help me make this into a three-dimensional thing. And these are guys that are really experienced. I was able to talk to marketers that, normally wouldn't have touched a brand new startup in concept phase to really help refine our thinking. So, what did I do? I went and talked to a lot of people, and then started spending a little bit money on designs with a designer that we ended up meeting with, who had worked at the North Face and had a lot of experience. We got introduced, and I met a couple of my factories and brought the designs to them and say, is this manufacturable? And they said, yeah, we'll do some prototypes for you. They did some prototypes and some more prototypes and about a year and a half of prototypes. And, all at the same time, while this kind of magic was happening, the logic side of the business was being worked on. We had the business plans put together, the financing set up, understand how we're going to sell to the consumer, what the vehicles were, all that sort of stuff. And I think as I step back, Mark, if I had any clue at that point in time, all the questions that we had to answer, I don't think I ever would have started this. It's just, in retrospect, it's overwhelming. But I think, entrepreneurs tend to be optimistic and ignorant at the same time, which is a bit of a dangerous combination. And thank God we are. Thank God we were. Else this wouldn't have gotten off the ground.
Yeah. What did that first bag, that first prototype look like? Do you remember it?
Yeah. It's right here. I keep it. It actually, it came out pretty well. It proved concept right away. And so it really looked kind of the way we wanted it to. It worked kind of the way we wanted it to. So we said, you know what? We know we can do this. And the interesting thing is the price was kind of where we wanted it to. So then it just became a process of, working with designers and developers in the factory to iterate it. And then the most important thing is once we had something that was we were somewhat proud of, we then started showing it to consumers and getting feedback, both in terms of how they'd use it, what features they wanted, what features they didn't. And since that point in time, our Knack community has really been part and parcel of our development, not only our product development, but our service development and our service offering.
Well, and that was a lot of kindas on that first bag. What wasn't working? What was when you got it, where you're like,
It was too heavy. The zippers didn't open really easily. The pocketing wasn't right. So there was just not functional pocketing through the whole thing. So we had to really think about it. But the size was right, and it actually did work. So anyway, there was a lot of things that we had to work on, and you just start knocking them off.
Yeah, and it's now you're looking at it and you kind of chuckle, but I mean, was there a moment when your heart sort of dropped, or you felt like, oh man, maybe this won't work?
So to me, the biggest moment was when I had to write that first purchase order. And I had to write that first purchase order before we had any kind of financing in place. So, basically I was buying a bunch of bags. And, I had a real crisis of confidence at that point in time. Do I really want to do this? But luckily, Keith was on board at that point in time, was, really, one of the things that Keith is really optimistic. And he kind of balances my I don't want to say pessimism, but, I question a lot of things. And he's very optimistic. And he was really excited about this. And that meant a ton to me. So, it really helped soothe my nerves to write that purchase order and send that deposit through.
Yeah, I can imagine as a new brand. Look, I mean, a very easy response to you would be like, does the world really need another bag?
Yeah.
And so there is this confidence, this belief in yourself against the world. And I can just imagine that when you're writing that first purchase order, you're like, this is either going to be great, or I'm going to be giving birthday and holiday gifts of our prototype bag for the next 10 years to everyone I know.
That's literally, that is an exact quote. I I remember saying to my family, I hope you like this bag because you're going to get it for a long time.
That's right. And so you bought some bags, but do you remember the first bag that you sold?
The first Knack?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when we launched the business online, it was October 23rd, 2018. And, Keith had everything ready to go on the site. And I just remember that it goes live. And I'm literally watching that first order to come through. And the first order did come through. We actually had a pretty good day. And I remember the guy that bought it. And this is a great, great feeling. And then, more orders came through. It's like that cartoon where you see the speedometer click and then it clicks again and then it clicks a little faster. And, it was just such a high to see something like that and say, you know what, there are people out there that actually get this and like this.
Yeah. What about the first person that maybe came back to you and wasn't happy?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm the harshest critic of the bag. I look at this bag and I see about 50 things I'd like to do differently or that don't work the way I'd like to. I have yet to have anyone come back and identify all 50 things. So, usually it's confirmation when someone comes back and says, not for me, didn't like it. It's confirmation that we just have to do better. The next iteration, the next version of the bag has to be better.
Yeah. And so you're a brand that, a big part of your messaging, a big part of your positioning was like, hey, if you're traveling a lot and doing these 1 or 2 day trips, this is the perfect bag for you.
Right.
How in this current climate, being the marketers that you are, how are you handling that and starting to change your positioning in your branding?
Yeah, the real positioning about this is it's the bag for a mobile professional, and travel's only a portion of what they're doing. So in actual fact, it's not the travel side of the business or the current environment that's impacting us. It's the fact that people are still sitting in their homes. They're not going to see clients. They're not going to the office. They're not going to work out at the coffee shop. They're not going to the gym. So, that's really the issue. But fundamentally, we believe that's going to change. So right now, we stay the course. We really want to reinforce, and we are reinforcing, that we are a bag for what is going to happen when all these safer at home orders are lifted. And that's really, I think, a fundamental trend away from dedicated offices, 5-day-a-week commutes to those dedicated offices. This pandemic that we're going through and the crisis it's creating, I believe, and we all believe firmly, is going to create a much greater number of mobile professionals working from home part of the time, working from clients part of the time, working in an office part of the time. That environment is right for a one bag brand.
Yeah. And, so I recently became a proud owner of a Knack bag. And I will say that there are some real differences in the Knack bag and the way you both are approaching this challenge. What are some of your favorite, features that you just love about the Knack that, you were like, aha, like I finally, I think there's something so amazingly great about being into something that you care about and then being able to make it the way you want to make it because someone else isn't. Like what features perhaps were big breakthroughs for you?
Well, there's two things. One is actually product and the other is brand related. And the product thing is I just love the fact that our bag weighs, looks, feels like an everyday professional backpack, the kind of backpack you put your laptop in and take to work. But then it's got this fully functional, hidden, expandable suitcase attached to it that basically you open it up and expand it when you want to use it, and you close it and get rid of it when you don't want to use it. So essentially, it is an everyday bag that doubles really well as a travel bag. I love that about it, and that's the fundamental point of this product. But on the service side and the business brand side, one of the things that Keith and I said from the very beginning, Mark, that it's been a guiding principle of our brand and our business. We don't do anything if we wouldn't have done it for a friend. And what do I mean by that? If we're thinking about sending out or doing a marketing program or doing a product, the first question we ask ourselves is, would we send this to a friend? Would we give this to a friend? Would a friend find this of value? And, I like to think that all of us at Knack put everything we do through that lens. And I'm really proud of that. If you talk about to our customers about our customer service, if you talk to our customers about our approach to quality and our approach to our team, we really try not to do anything that we wouldn't do, for a good friend. Maybe that's a derivation of the golden rule, but it really has helped us. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah. And, we had a former guest on the podcast, Jed Rose, and he said something to me that really stood with me and I think is relevant. He said, you can really tell a lot about a person by the bag they carry and the shoes that they wear. And I'm like, oh man, I agree. What can we tell about a Knack person, someone carrying a Knack bag?
I think, Keith, I'm interested to hear what you say. But one, I'd like to think that if you see someone carrying a Knack bag, they're smart. They're smart in a lot of ways. They're smart about sustainability. They're not buying into consumerism. Again, they need to have 50 bags. They're smart in that they've found a bag that serves multiple needs that they've got, one bag that serves multiple needs that they've got. They're smart because they're not wearing a walking billboard. It's not like we've got logos emblazoned all over the product. So I think it's a smart consumer. It's a person that kind of, is a bit discerning and gets it.
Yeah, I was actually going to say well-educated and entrepreneurial, somebody who's, out there doing cutting edge stuff and wants to be on the cutting edge of not only a bag, but whatever they're doing in their life. We've got a lot of executives that carry our bags that, whether they're startup CEOs or just people out there trying to do new things. That's how I would envision our customers. And that's really a lot of the feedback we get from them. And then, kind of going back to, what Chad was saying, one thing, back to I don't want to rehash this, but back to kind of the features and things. I agree with what Chad's saying. I mean, for me, just the everyday use of this bag has been like really great for me personally. I like the top pocket because I can grab stuff out of it and easily access my wallet or my keys or whatever is there. But I'll tell you what, the aha moment for me is when I traveled the first time. It completely changes the way you travel. And that's, whether you're taking a road trip or taking a flight, it really hit me when I was able to walk on the plane the last minute and put the bag underneath the seat. I didn't have to fight for overhead space. And then the best part was when I had to do a layover and I didn't have to check my bags at gate check. As I walk off the plane, the whole lineup of people waiting to get their bags, I was like, wow, that would normally be me waiting for my bag, but I'm actually just walking by, I'm going to go meet a buddy for a beer. And I can get there 20 minutes sooner than I normally would. I mean, when you start adding that up, if you're traveling all the time, it was the real aha moment for me. I'm like, wow, this is actually a game changer. So yeah, I didn't, not to backtrack, but I wanted to get that in before I moved on. But the other thing that I think is really, really great about what we're doing is, and Chad alluded to this, but I'm a huge believer in really, really good customer service and listening to our customer. I just think through the years, it's just, I look at the brands that I really like, and I've always had really good brand experiences. Whether I have a problem with the product or I have a question, they're always really good about it. So I think we've invested a lot of time and energy in listening to our customer and actually working with them and listening to them, if they've got a problem, or sometimes, like you said, every once in a while, the bag's just not for that person. And we've have a generous return policy. And so all those things, I think if people don't like this version, they're like, I like the concept, but I may not like this. I'm going to come back for the next version. And that to me is really the most important in building a brand, because as Chad said, he looks at the bag and sees 50 things. I look at it and I don't see 50, Chad, but I see maybe 40 that I'd like to change. And so, it's not going to fit everyone. And we want to be able to, make sure that people are happy with their purchase. And if they're not, that's okay too. I think that's super critical.
Yeah. Where's the name Knack come from?
Oh God, I hate that question. The canned answer, Mark, is that, people have a knack for, carrying their stuff around with them. That's the canned answer. The real answer is we just spent a lot of time trying to find a great name that resonated to both Keith and me that wasn't already taken in this category. And we went through a lot. So, this bag was almost George, frankly. And we're kind of giving up at that point in time. But yeah, it's really, it was something about, ultimately people have a knack, they're smart, they get it, and they know how to get from point A to point B easily.
Yeah, well, I actually love that answer. I just released a podcast maybe 2 weeks ago that was a naming masterclass, where I just basically went through like how we name names, and it's all about finding the right name, not the perfect name, and it's okay, more than okay, to do it the way you did it, as long as you have a story kind of behind it, which you do. So, I mean, I think that's a great answer. And I think that's really relevant. I think that, a lot of times people think there has to be this like moment, for their name where it represents the exact time that they were spoken to from above and got the idea for the business. But that's not the case at all. So, I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that, a lot of people can learn from that as well. So as we come to the end here, what does the future look like for Knack?
Well, I think, as I said, given what we see as really a fundamental change in how people work that's coming out of this current crisis, we think we're in great shape to take advantage of that. And really, when I say take advantage of it, I mean really help people cope with this new work environment. Our product really reduces friction in their daily life. It makes it easier to get out their front door. And we believe firmly in helping people get out their front door. Both Keith and I have had really the benefit of being able to travel all over. I've visited over 40 countries in my life, and I'm a firm believer in getting out the front door, meeting people. And if we can make that a little easier, and we can make this future world where, your commute's a little more challenging and where you work is a little more challenging, if we can make that easier for our consumer, I think we will, and I think it'll be great.
Chad, Keith, thank you so much for coming by and sharing your story. We'll make sure to link to Knack in the show notes. For those of you that don't like show notes, it's knackbags.com, knackbags.com.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate you having us. It was a lot of fun chatting with you, and thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I really appreciate it.
And that is Chad Mellen and Keith Bristol of Knack Bags. I love Chad's insight that it was his network and experience that has allowed him to be a successful entrepreneur and really understand what makes a great brand. Too often, I think there's a misconception that you need to start a company day one and go out and claim your personal legend. There's a lot to be said to building your learning and your network for brands that are doing it right, and then taking that knowledge and launching your company when you are ready. Thank you again to Chad Mellen and Keith Bristol of Knack Bags. And if you're looking for a great looking bag that is fit for both work and play, I encourage you to check them out. Well, that's the show. Until next time. Make sure to visit our website, www.wildstory.com, where you can subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. I like big stories and I cannot lie. You other storytellers can't deny.